All right, so now that we have our background, our sky all filled in and the river reflection filled in the way we want it, again, noted we go dark to light and then light to dark for the bottom area. I'm going to go ahead and start mixing up the different values of the pinks for the trees. And in my palette here, I've just added in a few what I had handy. So I've got that fire engine red, some pinks over here, and my titanium white. I cleaned up my palette. My brush is all nice and cleaned up. So I'm going to go ahead and mix up a very, very light, almost not even there, but it's very important to create depth in the Impressionist painting. So I'm just going to dip into my white, the titanium white, and I'm bringing it over to my palette. And then I'm only going to take maybe a small little corner, like a 10% dip into the red. And I'm creating this very, very light, again, almost not even there color. And if you want to thin your paints out, you can dip into your water and bring that on over to the palette. And I'm just mixing, again, very light color. I might even dip into this little pink here. So I only have a little bit on my brush, and I'm going to take the extra off and just clean it off a little bit. And then I'm going to take this color and I'm going to actually bring it in where I want that far off foliage to kind of start appearing. So in here towards the center, I'm just going to start adding in a little bit of that titanium white and red mixture. And notice I'm turning my brush and I'm just using a square, one of my older brushes. So it gives hints or impressions of bunches of leaves. Again, you're not seeing a whole lot as far as the pink color yet, but that's going to help create that depth. So I'm going to bring this kind of up and out. And I'm imagining some trees growing this way. And as they get closer to the edge or closer to the viewer, the trees change size. So further back, they're nice and light. They've got more natural light kind of peeking through them. And then as we get something over here, I'm bringing my brush up and now I'm about 2/3 of the way up on my page. And I'm dipping in whenever I feel like my brush is not bringing enough paint over. And I'm just kind of imagining where the trees are going to be and what they're going to look like. So I'm just putting in some bunches of leaves. And maybe I'll bring a few over this way. So very, very light. I'm just tapping or dabbing my brush right onto the canvas. And again, I'm using just an old square brush. And I'm turning it different directions so I'm not getting the same repetition of pattern throughout it. And as they get a little bit further to this right-hand side, they are going to get larger and become more saturated with color. So I could dip back into my red and recreate a different color variation over here. So it's just going to be a little stronger in that color. And when you have something that you're happy with, you can go ahead and start bringing that in. So here you're able to see the different variations. I've got that real far light color. And then I'm just bringing in, I might even put a little bit over here. I don't want to go all the way in with it because as it gets closer to the viewer, it's going to have less natural light coming through it, gets a little bit larger and more vibrant in colors. I'm just going to bring that in over here. And I'm just giving little hints or implications of trees. This is an Impressionist painting. So we just want to let the viewer know the basics of where the trees are going to be. You don't have to give them all of the fine detail. And I might even bring some of this darker tone just a little bit up into here. Okay. On this outside, notice I'm layering the colors right over the top. So now I really want to start bringing this outside edge with some more vibrancy. Grab it into this pink. Again, you could be doing the color mixing just with white and red. And I'm just mixing this up off to the side. And now I'm turning my brush and giving hints of more of a vibrant pink. And I don't want to cover all of the sky that's happening in the background. In real life, there wouldn't be just a solid tree. Little bits of light do start popping through. And I'm going to grab some more of this hot pink. And I'm mixing right over the top into my palette. And I'm going to actually start filling in a few of my closer bunches of leaves and trees. Now I'm just going off from where I had done my original placement, and something right about here I had a branch filling out. And now I want to fill in the rest of my tree. Little pops of color so it starts pulling forward. Same bright, vibrant color happening to the right. And I'm twisting my brush. I'll dab into some water here and kind of clean off the top of my brush. I still want a few light variations. I'm just going back and forth between the two. Like that. Now I haven't even started going into the bottom reflection, but that's something I could be planning for. I could bring some of this lighter color even down further if I wanted. And I'm just taking and dabbing the brush onto the page. So we're starting to get all the foliage in place. And again, this is my river down here. I'm just dabbing my brush. Something like that. Okay, from this part, we're going to start talking a little bit more about adding in some of the trunks of the tree. So for that, I am going to take just a small round brush, clean that off. And I might go in between, if I got a little bit of a smaller one too. So I'm just going to have that off to the side and ready to go. Grabbing some of my brown acrylic, giving it a shake because these haven't been used for a while. Popping that open and just putting in a little bit of brown. For contrast, now black can and will get overpowering on your paintings. So I'm only gonna, if this will work, I'm only gonna put just a small amount of black into my palette. And then I'm gonna start thinking, okay, where would the trunks of these trees fall? Get off my brush here a second. To start myself off, I only want to give little hints of where the trunks are. So I'm just dipping my brush into my paint here. Just a chocolatey brown, whatever you have handy. And I'm going to start adding in where I put that placement with my pencils. So I had down here, just that little trunk of the tree. And they do flare out towards the bottom because I got to hold up that rest of the tree. And I might add in just a little right off to the side where parts of that trunk is peeking through the rest of the leaves here. Again, like we've talked about in class, you know, trees grow from large trunks down at the bottom into smaller branches. I think over here I want to add that beginning part of that arching branch that I had that follows right through here. So I'm going to imagine the branch is going through the center here and coming down, and maybe just getting that into its placement. Now with acrylics, if you do something you don't like, you can go back in and rework that and cover it up once it dries too. Up here, I feel like the tree might continue, maybe with another branch there. And I believe I had another small branch down, or trunk, I should say, down at the bottom. So I'm just arching and kind of bringing them together. Just filling in the rest of the story. So I'm imagining just a small little piece of land is kind of jutting into the lake area itself. So I'm going to fill this in a little. And here I could dip into the black, and I'm just going to mix, maybe just right on the top here, some more contrast. And I'm being careful where I'm placing my arm so it doesn't go into the wet paint. You'll be working in this in sections, so you won't have to worry about that as much. So I'm just giving some shape and dimension to the branches of the trees. I'm just working softly into the sides. Now, as the paint is used up on my brush, I don't want to clean my whole brush down. I'm just going to add some water to it. Find an open spot on my palette. Let's see if I got a smaller brush handy. I'm just opening up the smaller brush here. I want to give the background trees, they're going to be further back in the rest of the painting. So I want to use a smaller brush and just loading a little bit of the paint up and into it. And back here, I'm going to start giving hints of some trunks of the trees, maybe a hint of a branch sticking up here. I'm barely touching my brush to the canvas. I'm just giving little hints of where those trees are starting to form. And since I have a smaller brush handy, I'm going to bring some more detail to the top. And again, just using that last little bits off my brush. Little bits of pigment, so I'm getting a softer variation of color. So that would be the basics of the tree, the leaves, some of the branches. Now that my other brush is sort of dried up, I'm going to dip it in and cover up. And giving it more dimension, just covering up some other areas. And if I really wanted to get more into that hot pink, just dip into it and bring that up. And I'm allowing the branches to sort of peek through. I'm not showing the entirety of the branch. And I'm not covering all of the blue in the background either. I just want to give the hint that there is sky and land behind going on in the rest of the painting. Get this where you can see it better. There we go. So that would be the basics of the trees and the river itself. Okay, for this next part, we're going to start developing more of the values and giving some natural shading to be taking place in the painting. So I want to make sure that the inner portion of the trees, I'm using less pressure because less light is popping through. And I'm going to be adding more paint over the branches themselves. I kind of started doing that over here, but I still want to push it even further and just giving a hint or an implication of the trunks of the trees. I want to give the feeling of things are overlapping. So I'm going to go and grab my same colors that I've started working on over here, except this time I want to darken it. So I'm just grabbing a slight little bit into the black. You can see that. And I'm bringing that onto the palette and mixing that pink and the black together. Again, I'm just using an old scrubbly brush. It works really well to give that feeling of leaves or bunches of leaves, if you can see that off to the side. And I think I'm going to bring a little bit of that red back in. Just want to darken it down, building up some contrast. So now I'm taking it over to my painting, and I just did a small little test swatch. I still want it to be darker, so I'm going back into the black and mixing this up, loading it onto my brush. And you can see I'm kind of dabbing the extra off. I still want it a little darker yet. I'm just dabbing those extra bits of paint off. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm doing this a little extreme as far as colors go, so you can see it from home, or on the camera, I should say. Clean the extra off my brush, and I'm just bringing it over. Now here, I'm going to develop the shading that goes on the undersides of the trees. I feel like I've gone a little dark with it, so I'm just going to quickly make an adjustment in color. I think that's one of the fun parts of working with acrylics is you can go back in and change things up and layer as you go. And if you don't like how something's turning out, you can go back in and go right over the top of it. So I'm just building up some depth. And over here, I want to darken through these areas yet. There we go. Bringing some of that paint down onto the undersides of the branches or bunches of leaves. So now it's starting to look more like cherry trees. As I'm going, I'm looking to see where it needs some more depth, where it needs some light shining through. I really want to push that contrast from that medium to the dark pink that I mixed up over here. And I'm actually going to take the same dark color and I'm going to start bringing it down where I had that bit of a reflection going. So I'm just copying what I have up here. Notice I'm not doing it directly under. I'm leaving a little bit of space there, and then I definitely want this curved bow just with that dark color, and I'm twisting my brush and giving that mirrored reflection starting to look in the water. Something like that looks pretty good. Now with it being into the water, I could even darken that further. I don't want it to appear as being the same values as what's happening up top there. And down here, I just want to darken down. So I didn't even dip back into the palette. I'm just bringing some more dark areas, some more dark values into it. And I'm letting the paint run out on my brush, so it has to mix with what's happening with the paint behind it. So at this point, I would kind of pause and we'll stop the second part of the tutorial. We will continue on giving more depth focusing in on our main subject, which would be the left side of the tree here, because that's what I really want to jump forward to the viewer. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.